For those of you guys who don't know, I was born in 81, graduated high school 2000, so I'm like the oldest of the millennial generation. Okay, millennials graduated high school 2000, and after that, our parents, like my parents' generation, was the baby boom generation. Gen X was actually the generation like older than me, but the baby boomers were really the ones that gave birth to the millennial generation. Now, the baby boomers in the 60s had a big problem with drug use. Okay, and this was like one of the first generations really to have a big problem with this. When my generation was coming up, like in the 80s, okay, and in the 90s, there was a big pushback in the schools and amongst that generation, the generation that, those baby boomers that survived all that and didn't get involved in that. There was a big push to preach to the youth how bad drugs were. We had this pounded into our heads in school. They used to give out these ribbons like "Say No to Drugs," and they would just lecture us forever. Give us assembly after assembly, speaker after speaker, like pounding into our heads how, educating us on how this drug's going to mess you up like this, that drug's going to mess you up like that. Putting us out to the max about drugs. Okay, so it seemed to me like my generation, the millennial generation coming up, that kind of declined, especially some of the hard drugs. Okay, there was a dip in that. Now, I admit I don't have any studies on this as far as like nationwide drug use, but it seemed from the 60s, like into the 70s and 80s, it kind of was going down a little bit. Okay, so when my generation came up, though, when I graduated college, I went to work in the high schools, okay, as a substitute teacher. So I got to go to all the high schools, okay, all the high schools in the Chicago area. Now, I didn't see in the high schools that I was working at, and I was working at, practically all the ones on the north and west side, anywhere near the amount of education about drugs as my generation received. Okay, it just wasn't the paranoia, the fear, the impetus to just really pound it into these kids' heads about how bad drugs are. It wasn't there. I didn't see hardly any. In health class, okay, the teacher might have a chapter on that or whatever, but the endless preaching about how bad drugs are, it was not given to the generation after me, the Gen Z. And what I started to see was the Gen Z revert back to what the baby boom generation was on. And people blame all type of stuff. They point the finger every which way, the music and all that. It was everything. They wouldn't be dying like right away or suffering health problems that were publicized. Okay, maybe the doctor is checking in on them and saying, hey, you got this problem, your liver doesn't look too good, your kidneys are messed up, but they're not talking about that in their raps. Okay, so the kids are seeing them do it, and then the kids get influenced, they start doing it. The Gen Z, the drug use is taken off like to a level at least to where the baby boom generation was at in the 60s, and maybe even a little bit beyond that. For some reason, they got it into their heads that there are like certain drugs where it's like you can do this drug and you're not a junkie. So over the last 10, 15 years, we've seen rapper after rapper after rapper dying off of this stuff. Okay, these supposedly harmless drugs like the pills and all this stuff. It doesn't seem that the shorties don't seem to be getting the message because they're still doing it. And they have this idea, the majority of the ones that I talk to have this idea in their heads that you can do it to a certain level, like do a certain amount of it, and it's safe. Like as long as I don't go past this, I'm good. And this is a myth. The biggest one, and this is probably the biggest one, is Percocets. Okay, because it's actually the acetaminophen in the Percocet that ends up killing people. This is basically Tylenol, okay? And there's a warning on acetaminophen, Tylenol, generic acetaminophen, that you cannot do this stuff long term. It will destroy your liver. Even doing a large amount at one time can cause acute liver failure. Acetaminophen is very difficult for the liver to process, and it causes damage. Even a small amount causes a small amount of damage. You do it over time, it causes more and more damage to where eventually your liver fails. That's not something that you can just like walk off like a sprained ankle. A failed liver is going to kill you. Stuff that's like a slow killer like this, sometimes that's the most dangerous because people are doing it once or twice. Okay, nothing happens. Okay, so I could do it 3 times. Okay, nothing happens 4 times. Nothing happens. Oh man, I've been doing this forever, man. I've been doing this for the last year. I'm good. I can keep doing it. And but the whole time it is creeping up on them. Then they get to year 3 or 4, and they're found on the floor of their apartment, whatever, dead. A lot of these kids, if they're living for the moment and just doing whatever they want to do, whatever is going to make them feel good right now, that typically leads psychologically to a feeling of emptiness and like no purpose in their life, which is, I think, a spiritual problem. I know I got atheists and everybody that watch the channel that disagree with that, but that's a whole nother topic. But the drugs doesn't do anything but just temporarily cover and anesthetize that feeling, and the underlying problem remains. So they start moving on to heavier stuff and heavier stuff, and they start doing it in combination. The acetaminophen, especially when you're doing it with other substances that are difficult for the liver to process, specifically alcohol. And this is another part of the warning on a Tylenol bottle. You do this together with alcohol, it can definitely increase the risk of liver failure. They're doing all this, man, and these shorties are dropping like flies off this stuff, man. Gen Z, I'm telling you, man, like every generation I know says like, oh man, back when I was a shorty, like we didn't do stuff like that, like we were more disciplined, this and that. And I see the debates going on online about like, is this really true, or are these old heads just reminiscing, like seeing the old days through rose-colored glasses? You guys know what I mean? In this case, man, I'm telling you, it really is true. Like the millennial generation, like in the 80s and 90s, bro, it was not this bad with the drugs. It was not. Like Gen Z is just out of control with this stuff, man. And I'm telling you guys, the drugs, the dope, this is the biggest factor in what's turning up the streets. I was locked up with a guy, man, who was telling me, like this dude was like 19. He was saying like I wouldn't have done what I did if I wouldn't have been off them pills. He kept on saying it. And I believed him because I mean that's like he was being honest. They get off that stuff and they don't know they still know what they're doing, but it's like it just anesthetizes all the fear, all the psychological inhibitions about their actions. And it makes a lot of guys feel like they got superpowers, like they're untouchable, like they're invincible and they're bulletproof, and they're not. So it disconnects them from reality, because all that's an illusion. So Lil Jeff, man, he's like the poster boy for what's going on with Gen Z. I'm telling you guys, and I'm saying this especially for the parents and everybody who's thinking about doing some stuff that can get them locked up, which I've also done. Okay, and I'm facing time too, but I don't have kids. But I acknowledge that what I'm saying is kind of hypocritical. But if you're doing stuff that can get you locked up, you're going to be sitting in there unable to raise your kids, and they're going to be out here with all these other Gen Z dope fiends, which basically is what Gen Z is. I mean, it's a bunch of dope fiends, man. Like the whole generation, bro. They're all doing this. Your son or daughter is going to be influenced by them and is going to be probably led down that same path. So I don't know what's going to happen with the generation after them, but man, like I tremble for that, bro, because I'm telling you, man, Gen Z off the dope is all the way messed up. He was doing that stuff on camera, bro, snorting the perk, like right there. I think it was a perk he was snorting, like crushing it up and snorting it right there on camera. Bro, that whole interview was depressing and sad, bro. Just listening to his voice, it was like listening to a zombie, like a dude who was dead but still walking around. Somebody who's real around him, one of his real family members, real friends or whatever, needs to talk to that dude ASAP. He was telling DJ UTV, like, you think my future isn't bright? And, DJ UTV, I mean, I understand. I'm not putting this on DJ UTV because I understand he has a platform. He has to be polite to his guests. He has to do that. But his future looks like if he makes it to 25, I'll be shocked, man. If he makes it to 30, doing what he's doing right now, he was just talking about like, man, we stay outside like dropping our low on, like, bro, everybody who's being honest can see it coming. Like if he makes it to 30, it will be an absolute miracle, man. So you guys let me know what you think in the comment section, man. Am I right about my assessment with Gen Z? But this is the way I see it going, bro. Like they are all just crashing out, and it's the drugs, man. Like they don't, like nothing is sacred to them, man. They don't respect their bodies. Like they don't respect their bodies as something sacred. A lot of them are, they don't believe in that. Like they don't believe in like anything sacred, not even their own body. So they don't respect it, or anybody else's body for that matter. So I mean, you see the way they're going, man. But what's gonna happen with the generation after that, man, is crazy. It's terrifying, man. You guys let me know what you think in the comment section, man. It's your boy Chicago News. I'm out.